handful of years ago, as a newly hired tenure track faculty at UW-Whitewater, I had to attend an orientation with all of the other new faculty. And since this was higher education, they asked us to introduce ourselves by talking about our research. Makes sense, right? But I was sitting in the back of the room where I'm comfortable because I'm primarily a writer, and that's where you tend to find writers, or a home behind a closed door, so you don't actually have to talk to anyone. I'm only partially kidding about that. But in any case, since I was in the back, I got to hear all of these introductions. And I heard one of my new colleagues, who's a sociologist, talk about his research. And he was doing ride-alongs. He had been doing ride-alongs for years with local police in Milwaukee and in Chicago to research the first point of contact between inner city residents when they kind of entered the criminal justice system, right? So that first police stop. He was doing research on that. Another of my colleagues, soon-to-be colleagues, was an economist. And she was researching, I had to write this down, trend shocks in the counter-cyclical U.S. current account. Another was a mathematician. And his recent dissertation looked at properly stratified endomorphism algebras. Still have no idea what that is. None. But you get the idea. This went on and on, right? There were 20, 25 of us in the room. And these people were all doing really interesting, pretty complex things. And with each passing introduction, I became more and more nervous because at some point I was going to have to introduce myself. And I had no idea what I was going to say. I mean, what do you say as a fiction writer? Like, hi, I'm Erin, I make shit up. I mean, this is, that's kind of what I was thinking. And so, I thought about it, and I finally got up and I said, I don't have an area of research. I tell stories. And I should have given myself more credit at that point, because here's the thing. Stories have power. Words have power, right? And it took me years and years to realize this. Kind of just came around to this. It was years before I felt at home in a university setting alongside all of those economists, mathematicians, business school professors. And there were a few things that actually helped me realize the value of this. And one of them is this. I read my students a poem. This is not exactly a revolutionary act as an English professor, I get that. But it was a class of almost all veterans. And I created that class after a meticulous, lengthy research process for my second novel, which is this right here, Learning to Stay. And it's about a woman whose husband returns from a tour in Iraq, and he is suffering from traumatic brain injury and PTSD. And researching that, I am not a veteran. I don't come from a military background. I'm not married to a veteran. But the amount and depth of research that I had to do for that really ignited a sort of passion in me for veterans issues. I saw that there was a lot to be done, a lot that wasn't being done. And so I created this class on campus at Whitewater, a composition class only for veterans. And what I hoped, it wasn't that we covered material that was that different from other classes. We did look at a lot of war poetry, war literature, but I hoped that it would help the veterans on campus connect with one another, to find each other, and in doing so to connect with the world of higher education, or maybe reconnect with it, as the case may be. So on the first day of that all-veteran class, I was going over the syllabus, and composition at Whitewater, Comp 2, consists of drama and poetry. So I told them, we're going to be doing a play or two, but mostly we're looking at poetry. And that's when a guy in the back row raised his hand. I called on him, and he was a big guy. He was kind of burly and tough looking, and actually most of the back row looked like that. They were all kind of scowling at me and sitting there. And I learned later that all of these guys in the back row, this group, they'd all been infantry. They had 10 tours between them. And the particular guy I'm talking about sort of wore his veteran status like a neon sign. He came in every day with a different t-shirt on, you know, some like ones that said, keep calm and return fire, or there was one, my favorite was, some days are Sunni, but most are Shiite. That was a good one. And he had, you know, sleeves of tattoos. He had this battered baseball cap, camouflage baseball cap with the reverse American flag on it. And so he raises his hand and he says, "You're not making us talk about our feelings in here, are you?" And I was like, no, we're reading. We're reading and discussing literature. Not going to make you talk about your feelings. And later in that class, I handed out a poem to them, and we read it together. And this is a poem by an OEF vet named Colin Halloran, and he's, along with Brian Turner and Kevin Powers and these bigger names in kind of post-9/11 poets, is slowly making a name for himself. And I was at a conference where he read this poem. I really liked it. I really liked what he had to say. And I'm going to play it for you here so you can kind of get the feeling. It's pretty, it's relatively short, pretty manageable. Let's see if this comes up.
Number 2 on the lighting.
Number 2.
With lighting.
Let's see with lighting. Just picture mute. You know what? It might just play. You can listen to it. It's better if he reads it other than me. No, that's not working either. Room lighting, 2. Got it. Return to main page. Awesome.
All was so uncertain, but uncertainty was guaranteed. But here, college, and of all places, freshman psych class, where certainty should be ensured by class lists and start times, I'm uncertain once more, and this window doesn't seem so high. I wouldn't think of jumping, though clearly I just did. And if I can't trust the thoughts I think, should I put faith in the unthinkable? Other students are looking out the window too. This window with a perfect view of the protrudes, of the roof of the buildings across the street, of the main intersection, the 17 cars that have passed, the 3 that have done so twice. Are the others noticing these things too? Are they aware of how high it is, or isn't? My peers, though it somehow seems unfit to use that word, I never complain about the weight of my backpack. They daydream. They gaze detached out the window because out there is not in here, and in here there is a woman talking, droning about drinking alcohol. I drink alcohol, beer mostly, but never the cheap stuff. I was cursed with a palate. Sometimes wine, this palate is developing, but that's out there. And out there is not in here. I cannot drink in here because in here is school, and out there is not, though I learn. Maybe more. And in here being school, there was a woman talking about alcohol. Some guys, boys, have stopped looking out there and begun to pay attention to this woman. She has asked who in here drinks alcohol out there. These fellows think they're cool. I can tell because they nudge and do the bro nod. Chocolates. I indicate more reverently that I can be counted in this category. She moves in, questioning, frowning, why, how, fake ID? I must be wrong. This is a class for freshmen. This is why she is here. To talk to first years about their first years and the dangers we've been warned of since 7th grade. But the dangers I faced did not come from college bars, from darkening street corners. The 4 years that separate me from those wedged into desks around me carried me into places they only see in books, on TV. No streets for corners, no college for bars. Just violence from an unknown enemy. That was always certain. So now I sit and think thoughts I think or dare not to, and while those around me dream, I can't help but notice that this window doesn't seem so high.
So, I played that. There we go. Success. So I played that, or I read that poem with my class. And after this, you would have thought I would have ignited a fuse in the room. They started talking, right? This class of all veterans. And they started talking about how this guy got them. And about how this was how they felt being on campus for the first time, right? They started talking about how they kind of went into their frustrations, how they, couldn't believe the cell phone use in class. When someone said they wanted to take the cell phones out of hands and just stomp on them until they splintered. And someone else said, I don't understand how it's so hard to put freaking paper in the copy machine when it runs out in the library. Like, why can't these students do this? And so a couple days go by, and we have class again. And the burly looking guy in the back, who didn't want to talk about his feelings, is waiting for me after class. And he tells me that he took the poem that I gave him, and he photocopied it. And he left a stack in the vet's lounge, and then he was handing it out to everyone else he could find. Every other veteran that he came in contact with. He said, you've got to read this poem, this is awesome. And this was really exciting to me that he invested in, poetry. I'm just gonna turn that off. But I asked him if he had thought to give it to anyone else that he came across. And he looked at me sideways. I said, like who? I said, like other students, non-veterans. And he said, no, why would I do that? I'm not gonna get it, like they're not gonna read that. So that they wouldn't care. And I thought, they wouldn't care. And it started to occur to me after a few such exchanges with some of the students I taught, not exactly that, but similar, that we have a problem, I think. We have a problem in this country when it comes to our veterans. And this problem is not the one that we had during Vietnam, right? In Vietnam, and after that war, we loathed the war as a country. We loathed those who got us into it. And sometimes, unfortunately, that translated into a loathing for those who fought it, right? We did not give a good welcome to Vietnam veterans as a country. Today, we love veterans, right? We love to thank them for serving. We love to greet them in airports, buy their meals, give them discounted haircuts on Veterans Day. We put up yellow ribbons. We love to say how we support our troops, right? But that's not our problem either. I think the problem is that the opposite of love is not hate, right? The opposite of love is apathy. It's disinterest. We, as a country, love to love veterans. We love to pay them lip service. But it's like that student said to me, I'm not sure that we always care. After my book came out, this one, I hate to keep holding it up and plug it up, it's right here. I'll put it out of the way now, you've all seen it. When this book came out, my literary agent shopped it to Hollywood. Exciting, right? And every film agent she got on the phone, every producer, all said approximately the same thing. And that was, sounds good, but we're past the war. We're done with the war. We've moved on, other things. And this was fundamentally disappointing to me. I mean, could I have used more sales? Sure. Could I have used an economic boost from selling the film rights? Absolutely. But what was really, really disappointing was this idea that we as a country just get to move on from the war. We get to just decide when we're done. I mean, after all the research that I have done and kind of being at that point immersed with some of the veteran community, I thought that it's not right. Because veterans don't get to make that choice. David Finkel, who's this Washington Post Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, I challenge anyone to say that 3 times really fast. But he wrote 2 really fantastic books. One is called The Good Soldiers, and one is Thank You for Your Service. In The Good Soldiers, what he did was embed with the 216 infantry in Iraq, and he was there for most of their deployment, went back and forth. And when he came back, a year or so passed, and he started to get messages from these guys. And they said to him, things aren't going well. This is really hard. Like, my marriage is breaking up. I'm not sure what to do. I can't find a job. He started to get enough of these that he was concerned. And so he went and basically moved to Fort Riley, Kansas with these guys and embedded with them there. He's one of the first journalists, I think, that's ever done something like that. And the resulting book is Thank You for Your Service. And in Thank You for Your Service, which I would make required reading for every American if I could, I think it's a pretty fantastic book, a pretty fantastic piece of journalism. He coined this term the afterwar to describe what some returning veterans deal with, right? And this afterwar can be brutal. I'm sure you guys have all heard, the statistics. It's nothing new at this point if you ever have the news on or anything like that. Suicide, post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, right? Those are the biggies. But there's others, and he outlines many other things in this afterwar that are equally as brutal. Divorce, financial hardship, unemployment, homelessness, the list goes on. So these individuals, right, these veterans, less than 1% of the population,